Good evening. Tonight's story is called The Mitten String. This is one of my favorite stories. The Mitten String by Jennifer Rosner and illustrated, that means the person that drew the pictures, by Christina Swarner. It is said that Ruthie Totter's family warmed the hands of the entire village because everyone who lived there, big and small, wore mittens knitted from the Tober wool. The Tober sheep had the fluffiest wool in the region. On shearing days, friends and neighbors came to help Ruthie's family clip and gather the soft, downy fleece. The Tobers worked hard, scouting, picking, and carding their wool. Ruthie, who loved bright colors, prepared the pots for dyeing. When it was time for spinning, Ruthie's mother stood at the great wheel and spun the wool into yarn. See the big wheel? Most nights, Ruthie and her mother sat together and knitted. Ruthie loved how their stitches, each one of the tiny knot of yarn, added up to form warm, cozy garments. Ruthie especially enjoyed making mittens. She knitted plenty of extras in the smallest sizes because she had noticed that many of the children lost mittens every winter. Ruthie herself, had lost some, and her mother reminded her with a wink. On market days, Ruthie's parents loaded their wagon with both of the cloths of heaping baskets of yarn to sell and trade. Ruthie took along a basket of her most colorful mittens. See the basket of mittens she's holding? One day, on their way home from the market, Ruthie's father came upon a woman standing with her baby at the side of the road. The woman did not speak to them. Instead, she held up a slate, with a neatly printed message. Her husband had gone for help. The Tobers invited the woman and her child to spend the night. Smiling gratefully, the woman wrote her name, Bela, and her baby's name, Aaron, on the slate. Ruthie noticed a length of yarn wrapped around Bela's wrist. The yarn was the deepest blue Ruby had ever seen, deeper even than the special blue thread braided into the white tassels of her father's prayer shawl. Ruthie imagined that the mittens that she could make with the yarn like that. Why doesn't Bela speak? Ruthie asked her mother. Bela is deaf, her mother explained. She cannot hear, so she cannot speak. Luckily, she reads and writes. It's very wise of her to carry a slate and chalk. Ruthie watched in amazement as Bela communicated with Aaron using hand signs. To Ruthie, it looked as if Bela were standing before an invisible spinning wheel with her words flowing from her fingers like delicate strands of yarn. That night, Ruthie could not fall asleep. She wondered what it was like for Bela, not hearing and not speaking. Was the silence peaceful? Was it lonely? If Aaron needed her during the night, how would Bela know? Ruthie peered into their room. Bela lay sleeping, one arm dangling over the side of the bed. The blue yarn was still looped around her wrist. From there, it trailed across the floor to the cradle, ending in a bow around Aaron's tiny little arm. Ruthie remembered seeing a string trail through the village from little Sarah Lowley's sickbed to the synagogue's holy ark. Ruthie's mother had explained that the string carried the family's prayers for Sarah to get well again. But why would Bela tie a piece of yarn between herself and her baby in the night? Just then, Aaron began to cry. As his arms moved, the yarn tugged at Bela awake. Bela lifted Aaron into a soothing embrace and warmed his chilly hands on her cheeks. See the pretty picture of the mom baby? Early the next morning, Ruthie set to work, knitting her softest, fluffiest skein of yarn. She stitched a slender cuff and thumb. Then she shaped the tiny mitten top. Soon, Ruthie had one mitten just the right size for Aaron. As she was about to start on the other, Ruthie had an idea. This time she knitted a mitten big enough to fit Bela. Then she connected the mittens, large and small, with the length of a string, perfect for Bela and Aaron on the coldest nights. When Ruthie gave her the mittens, Bela smiled with delight. She showed Ruthie the sign for mittens, sliding her hand left over right and right hand over left. After breakfast, Ruthie knitted Bela and Aaron each a second mitten. Ruthie excitedly paired off the mittens from market, connecting them with a string that could be threaded through the child's coat sleeves. The string could keep the mittens from getting lost. You are both clever and kind, Ruthie's mother said, beaming with pride. You make our world a bit better with every little stitch. Later, Bela showed Ruthie the woody plants that she would use to make the bright blue for the dyes of her pots. Not long after, Bela's husband arrived with the repaired wagon, ready to take her family home from Shabbat. Bela unraveled the blue yarn from her wrist and handed it to Ruthie. Ruthie wrote her thank you on Bela's slate. She also wrote the day of their next sharing. By that time, Ruthie thought Aaron would have outgrown his tiny mittens, and she would make him a bigger pair, bright blue, and of course, tied together with a length of Tober yarn. Ruthie could hardly wait. And that, my friends, is the end of our story. Hope you enjoyed it.